Secretary of State, it's a poignant moment, being the 75th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. The men and women who perform QRA nowadays carry out a very similar role to their predecessors 75 years ago. I wonder whether you could give us a few words on the parallels between now and what happened in World War II.
Well, it's extraordinary to think that you have brave, well-trained, world-class pilots doing the same thing now as their heroic predecessors were doing 75 years ago. You remember Churchill's famous quotation that never in the field of human conflict was so much owed by so many to so few. And it is only a few, a handful of world-class pilots flying our Typhoons who keep our skies safe today, just as those Battle of Britain pilots did 75 years ago.
And as Secretary of State for Defence, you've been to visit the operation at RAF Lossiemouth. What are your thoughts when you first saw it, when you first went round?
I hadn't appreciated the fact that these pilots are on duty every minute of every day, Christmas Day, the middle of the night, to get up there and defend our skies. And we owe them a huge debt for that. They're ready round the clock to defend our freedom.
Do you think they have the resources they need? The Typhoons are going to be taking on a new role soon, a new multi-role aircraft. Is there enough there to defend the skies of Britain?
We have the fifth biggest defence budget in the world now, and a lot of it goes on the Royal Air Force, who really are the front line now. Our Tornadoes, as you know, are in action against ISIL out in the Middle East. We have the Typhoons defending our skies in Britain, defending the Falklands, and playing a role in NATO, helping to defend Baltic airspace against the Russian threat each of the summer months.
Well, I was going to ask you about the Russian threat. It's a threat that plays out not only in the Baltic states, but also close to the skies of the United Kingdom. How do you assess that as a current threat?
Well, it's a serious threat. It's not a game, and we have to respond to it. Russia is clearly testing our defences and the defences of other NATO members, and it's very important that we respond. And it's important we make sure that our skies are kept clear of any intrusion, that Russian aircraft are kept outside UK airspace, and it's also important that we make sure that if Russian planes come to the edge of our airspace, that there isn't disruption to commercial air travel.
Strictly speaking, they're not doing anything illegal because they're staying within international airspace. But when you have events such as the time they flew up the English Channel, they are going, as you say, into very busy commercial airspace. Is there any more pressure that can be put on Moscow to avoid such scenarios?
Well, we continue to point out that this kind of flying is extremely intimidatory. It's also dangerous. They may not enter our airspace, but they don't respond. They don't file flight plans. They don't respond to air traffic control. They don't even respond to our pilots when they're up in the air alongside them. And occasionally it means that civil airliners have to be diverted from their normal routes, and there is disruption from that. So it's unnecessary behaviour. It's intimidatory. It's designed to annoy us, but it's important we respond to it, and we do.
Does it annoy you?
It's unnecessary and intimidatory. It's something we could do without. But we have the RAF there. We have world-class pilots. They are ready round the clock to respond. We have to defend our airspace just as we have to defend our coast and our seas.
It is something they've been doing for decades, though. Relatively speaking, it is a known threat. The unknown threat is the passenger aircraft that might be coming in with terrorists on board. How does the country prepare to deal with a potential situation such as that?
Well, that's been a new threat ever since the Twin Towers, the attack on the Twin Towers in 9/11. And don't let's forget that some 67 Britons lost their lives in that attack. And we can never discount now the possibility that a terrorist may again use an aircraft as a kind of flying bomb to kill huge numbers of people on the ground. So this is a new threat, but again our pilots are ready to respond to that as well.
What is your role in QRA?
Well, I'm alerted every time the planes go up, every time there is an alert. Russians are coming towards our airspace. Obviously I'm alerted. If there's an unidentified commercial aircraft, then we have well-worn procedures. We plan for every kind of scenario. And in the end, the Prime Minister or a very senior minister, myself or one of my colleagues, will be available to deal with that particular threat.
And how does that play out? How are you contacted?
Well, in reality, the minister on duty that day, usually the Prime Minister, but occasionally one of the senior ministers who takes responsibility for this, will be alerted and will exercise ministerial control over the response. Will be given advice, but also be put in touch with the controllers to understand where our planes are, what warnings are being given, and what the response is from the unidentified airliner. And then there has to be an assessment made of just what the threat is, how dangerous this incursion is, and what the potential target might be.
And you practice this?
Yes, we rehearse these different scenarios. We have had identified aircraft coming into our airspace, failing to file a proper plan, for example, or to respond to air traffic control. Time and again, it turns out to be harmless, simply to be a mistake. But you never know, and you can't discount the possibility that one day a terrorist may use a plane as a flying bomb, may hijack a plane, place a bomb on it, and you have to be prepared, if necessary, to prevent that plane reaching its target.
Which means you might have to make the call to shoot it down.
In the end, you might have to take the toughest decision of all to protect the public by authorising a strike. But you hope, of course, that it doesn't come to that. And there are a number of other ways in which you can warn off that particular aircraft and try and get a response from it.
Are you prepared for that responsibility?
You have to be prepared in the end to protect the public. That is part of defence. Defence does involve responsibility. You have to be prepared. Our troops, our airmen, our sailors, they have to be prepared to fire, to respond when danger threatens. So you can't run away from that responsibility. Of course you hope you'll never ever have to do such a thing as, for example, shooting down a civilian airliner. But we know that airliners have been used as flying bombs before in the attack on the Twin Towers. And we have to be able to respond. Now, we have well-worked scenarios. Our pilots are very well trained to get up there as quickly as possible, try and establish contact with this mysterious airliner and work out whether it is a threat or whether it isn't. But in the end, that decision has to be taken by the Prime Minister or one of my colleagues.
And I imagine when the phone rings, even during an exercise, the heart beats a little faster.
Yes, you know, there are lives at stake, there are uncertainties, you're unsure as to how real the threat is, and there's advice available to you, but in the end, a minister has to take that decision.